January 26, 1945 in Holtzpuyer, France. A German soldier from the 2nd Mountain Division looked through the aid station window and watched as medics carried the wounded inside. His unit had just attacked with 250 men and 6 tanks against one American lieutenant who stood on a burning tank destroyer. The American had only one machine gun. Within 1 hour, the German force dropped to about 70 soldiers who could still fight. The survivors kept talking about the weapon that stopped them cold. The weapon was not some secret or special invention from Germany, but a simple American machine gun, first made in 1933. This gun, called the Browning M250 caliber heavy machine gun, became the most feared weapon in the American Army, not because it was complex, but because it was powerful and would not stop. The German survivors had just seen one of the most famous fights in American military history. First Lieutenant Audie Murphy, who was wounded in Alone, climbed onto a burning M10 tank destroyer and used its 50 caliber machine gun against a whole German infantry company supported by tanks. For over an hour, Murphy fired the gun so effectively that the German attack completely fell apart. The Medal of Honor citation, signed by Lieutenant General Alexander Patch on June 2, 1945, said Murphy caused about 50 enemy casualties. The wounds from 50 caliber bullets became well known to German doctors. Unlike rifle bullets that might only wound, 50 caliber hits caused terrible damage. The huge energy of the bullet meant a shot to an arm or leg often led to amputation, and a hit to the body was almost always deadly. German field hospitals near the front could recognize 50 caliber wounds right away, and there was little the medics could do except give comfort and try to stabilize soldiers for evacuation. Many never even reached the hospitals. The effect of the 50 caliber went beyond the wounded. German units hit by it often suffered fear, exhaustion, and confusion, much worse than those facing regular small arms fire. Medical officers noticed that soldiers who went through many 50 caliber attacks, even if they were not hit, showed strong signs of stress and battle fatigue. They knew that hiding would not save them from the next burst of fire, and that staying alive was mostly a matter of luck, not skill. This made them feel helpless, and that feeling was serious, both for their health and for the army. But what happened at Holtzpuyer was not the only case. From the fields of Normandy to the cold woods of the Ardennes, from the deserts of North Africa to the skies above Germany, soldiers learned to know and fear one sound: the deep, steady thunder of the M2 Browning firing about 450 to 575 rounds each minute. Every big 50 caliber bullet had enough power to go through light armor, break concrete, and completely destroy a human body. The change from doubt to fear had started 3 years earlier. The strength of American industry would soon be felt, not through numbers on paper, but in the stories of German soldiers who faced this gun and somehow lived to talk about it. What they saw changed how they thought about modern war and showed a deep truth about American battle planning. The United States had not made the most high-tech or advanced heavy machine gun. Instead, they made something much more dangerous. They made the most dependable, the most common, and the most mentally crushing crew-served weapon ever built. The hatred the Germans felt did not start with fear. It started with pride and contempt. On September 6, 1943, high above Stuttgart, 388 B-17 Flying Fortresses flew toward Germany's main industrial center. It was the first big daylight bombing of that city. German Air Force fighter units took off fast to stop them. Some were veteran pilots who had shot down many Allied planes over 2 long years of war. They felt sure of their Focke-Wulf 190 fighters. Each had 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns. The German pilots attacked from high and in front, just like their training told them to do. At about 800 meters away, they opened fire. Their cannons roared and shells flew toward the front bombers. Then something happened that changed how the Germans understood air battles forever. The bombers suddenly burst out with flashes of fire, not from being hit, but from their own guns. Each B-17 carried 13 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns, so when 36 bombers flew together, that meant 468 heavy machine guns, all firing the same 50 caliber bullets that could kill targets more than a mile away. Together, they fired over 6,000 rounds every minute, making a wall of steel that no fighter could break. German pilots felt their planes shake as 50 caliber bullets ripped through wings, engines, and glass. They had to pull away, diving down with smoke and leaking oil coming from their aircraft. That raid cost the Germans badly. 45 B-17s were lost, but the Luftwaffe lost far too many fighters and skilled pilots. They could not replace what the German pilots did not yet see was that they were facing not just a weapon, but a whole way of thinking about war. The Americans had fixed the problem of bomber defense not with fancy new tech, but by using massive firepower. Every B-17G carried between 5,000 and 7,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammo for its 13 guns, and some crews even brought extra ammo just to be safe. German pilots in their Me-109 or FW-190 fighters knew their cannons often jammed, especially in the freezing air high up. The German MG-131 13mm gun was better, but still needed perfect care and could fail at the worst times. The American Browning M2 was different. It just worked. It could fire nonstop for hours. It worked in temperatures from -40 to +40 degrees. It kept going even after being hit by enemy fire. It still shot even when the barrel was glowing red from the heat. American crews could swap out an overheated barrel in just a few minutes, and the gun would start firing again right away. Lieutenant Wolfgang Fischer, a German GG-88 pilot who flew missions against bombers, survived the war and spoke during Luftwaffe briefings in March 1946. His words showed what German airmen had finally realized. We called the American bombers die Fliegenden Festunen, the flying fortresses. But what truly made them fortresses was not their armor or their tight formations, it was those 50 caliber machine guns that never stopped firing, never jammed, and never gave us a chance. We lost so many pilots, not to the American fighters, but to the bombers' own defensive fire. Flying into them felt like flying straight into a meat grinder. The same thing happened on the ground, but in another way. On June 6, 1944 in Normandy, Officer Hans von Luck led part of the 21st Panzer Division trying to stop the Allied landings. Von Luck was no ordinary officer. He had fought at El Alamein, earned the Knight's Cross, and later wrote his famous book, Panzer Commander. His division was one of the first German units to fight the Americans in long ground battles. What von Luck found shocked him. American battle planning had put the 50 caliber machine gun on almost every kind of vehicle. Jeeps had them, trucks had them, half-tracks had them, tanks had them on top, tank destroyers had them, even supply trucks carried them for safety in convoys. The Americans had done something the Germans never even tried. They gave heavy machine gun power to their whole army. Von Luck wrote about it in his book. He said, "We had been told that our training and tactics would beat the Americans' material power. But in Normandy, I learned the truth. The Americans didn't need perfect tactics. They had so much ammunition, they could make mistakes and still win. Their 50 caliber machine guns were on every vehicle, every spot, always firing. We could not move in daylight. Whenever we tried to move, they opened fire right away and with huge strength. The mental shock was just as bad as the real moons. The German army had built its fighting plans around the machine gun too. Their MG-34 and later the MG-42 were great weapons. The MG-42 fired 1,200 bullets a minute, so fast that Allied soldiers called it Hitler's buzzsaw. German squads carried about 1,800 rounds for each gun, and their whole tactics were built to protect and feed the gun crew. That idea of the general-purpose machine gun was smart enough that NATO would later copy it. But the Germans had never dreamed of the size of the American use of the 50 caliber. One American armored division moving through France might have hundreds of them mounted on vehicles. American supply trucks used a planned firing pattern, one truck shooting to the right and the next shooting to the left to guard both sides and stop German ambushes. This worked very well against Panzerfaust teams trying to hit American tanks from close range. American armored units also used a method they called reconnaissance by fire. Instead of moving slowly and waiting for the enemy to show up, they just fired their 50 caliber guns non-stop at anything that looked suspicious. Trees, barns, stone walls, hedges. The non-stop firing either forced hidden German soldiers to stay down or made them shoot back and show where they were. This method, written about in reports like Tank Tactics from Normandy to Lorraine by Raymond Jerry Monch, drove German troops crazy. German soldiers who had fought on the Eastern Front thought they had already seen the worst kind of brutal war against the Soviets. But when they met American firepower in France, they realized it was different. German squad leaders who were captured later told American interviewers what it was like. These interviews, kept in the U.S. Army Historical Division, said, "When we fought the Russians, we faced huge waves of men and endless artillery. When we fought the Americans, we faced machine gun fire that never stopped. They fired at everything. They fired at nothing. They fired to keep our heads down. They fired so we could not move. They fired because they had endless bullets, and we did not." After just 2 weeks of fighting the Americans in the Bocage countryside,
German soldiers refused to leave cover during the day, not because they were cowards, but because they knew moving meant dying. The M16 multiple-gun motor carriage showed the American idea of firepower at its strongest. It was a half-track vehicle with 4 50-caliber machine guns in a powered turret, first built to shoot at planes. Together, those 4 guns could fire around 2,200 rounds a minute. American troops called it the meat chopper or the kraut mower. Reports from the 473rd Anti-Aircraft Battalion in November 1944 said that the M16's main job of shooting at planes often became its second job. Instead, it was used mostly against enemy soldiers on the ground. By late 1944, the German Air Force had been almost wiped out over Western Europe, so American anti-aircraft units began helping ground troops. The M16 was extremely deadly against German infantry and light vehicles. During the Battle of the Bulge from December 16, 1944 to January 25, 1945, M16 units stopped many German attacks just by sweeping their 4 guns back and forth across the advancing troops. The German soldiers who tried to ambush American supply convoys learned exactly why the 50-caliber gun was so feared. German plans for ambushing convoys called for letting the first few vehicles pass, then hitting the ones in the middle to block the road and trap the rest. They would then destroy the convoy piece by piece. This had worked well earlier in the war against British and Soviet supply lines, but it failed badly against American convoys. American plans placed 50-caliber armed vehicles all through the line, so when an ambush started, those vehicles opened fire right away with their 50-caliber guns, while other trucks moved around to attack the ambushers from the side. The return fire was so heavy that German ambush teams often took more losses than the convoys they tried to stop. German platoon leaders who joined these ambushes in France later told in post-war interviews how their tactics changed and failed. At first, they set up infantry with machine guns and Panzerfausts beside the roads, but the Americans had 50-caliber guns on many vehicles. The firepower from those convoys was deadly. German units soon learned to only attack single vehicles, not whole convoys. But single vehicles were rare because the Americans always traveled together for safety. They knew the Germans could not stop large groups. The American trick of alternating fire worked especially well. Trucks on the right side of the road fired to the right, and trucks on the left side fired to the left. This made crossing lines of fire that covered both sides at once. German troops who attacked from one side were suddenly hit from both the near and far sides of the road. The fear of being hit from multiple directions by huge bullets that tore through walls and trees and seemed to never run out of ammo made German ambushes almost impossible to win. American supply troops knew that the 50-caliber gun was their best defense. Both drivers and assistants were trained to use it. They carried far more ammo than official rules allowed. Convoy leaders had permission to shoot right away at any possible danger with full power. Because of this, by the middle and late parts of 1944, German forces had mostly stopped trying to attack American supply lines anywhere the Americans controlled the sky and had strong ground troops ready to fight back. This change affected not only small battles, but the whole German ability to fight effectively. German troops in France, and later inside Germany, could no longer stop American supply lines. American soldiers always got steady deliveries of bullets, fuel, gear. This let American battle plans assume firepower would always be ready when needed. German plans were the opposite. They had to deal with constant shortages of ammo and fuel, and knew that what little arrived would come late and not be enough. The 50-caliber machine gun showed both the cause and the proof of American supply strength. It worked so well because American factories could make endless amounts of ammo, and it kept operations going because the gun was so reliable once the ammo got there. Every round counted. German troops watching those glowing tracer bullets streak across the night sky knew they were seeing more than just gunfire. They were seeing proof of an industry they could never equal. The fear from the sky made it even worse. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, which American pilots called the Jug, carried 8 Browning M2 machine guns in its wings. One fighter could fire about 4,400 rounds a minute in a strafing run. German soldiers soon learned to recognize the P-47's bulky shape and the roaring sound that meant death was coming. When 4 of those planes attacked together, that meant 32 50-caliber guns blasting one area at once. They came in fast and low, often before anyone could react. Pilots started firing from about 600 to 800 meters away and dragged their fire across troops, vehicles, and any target in sight. Survivors said it felt like a sideways storm of metal where nothing survived. German supply officers who survived several of these attacks during the retreat from Normandy in August 1944 told later how powerless their men felt against American air power. "You hear the engines first," they said, "and when you look up, it's already too late. Bullets hit the road, the trucks, and the men all together. No wall or tree helps. Stone walls shatter, trees fall apart, metal rips like paper. One moment you're standing behind a truck and it's gone, just burning metal and fire. After that, soldiers learned to run from their trucks the second they heard airplane engines. Better to lose the vehicle than the vehicle and the crew." The P-47 proved very good at what American pilots called armed reconnaissance missions. Instead of aiming at one target, pilots patrolled areas looking for anything moving. Any German vehicle in daylight risked attack. Any troop column. Any supply convoy. Any artillery position. The 8 50-caliber machine guns gave pilots enough ammo to hit many targets in one flight. A pilot might strafe a convoy, then climb up, spot a tank platoon, then dive to attack them, then strafe a crossroads on the way back. The ammo load, about 425 rounds per gun, made 3,400 rounds total, enough for long fights. German units adapted by moving mostly at night and in bad weather, but this cost a lot. Supplies that should take hours to move now took days. Reinforcements were late or did not arrive. The Luftwaffe could not stop American air power by mid-1944, so German ground troops lived under constant threat of air attack, and the main weapon was the 50-caliber machine gun. The mix of ground and air 50-caliber fire made a full suppression effect. German units could not move safely in daylight because of strafing, and they could not move safely at night because American vehicles used reconnaissance by fire with mounted 50s to block roads and trails. They could not gather forces for counterattacks because American doctrine ordered immediate attack on any German formation with all available firepower, including 50-caliber guns that could keep firing while other weapons joined in. This reality broke German fighting power in the West. Not one single battle, not a wonder weapon, but the slow weight of facing an enemy where the heavy machine gun was everywhere in huge numbers and used so freely that old military answers stopped working. German tactics, German training, and German fighting spirit could not fix that problem. None of these things could beat the plain math that American forces could bring more firepower to any spot faster than the Germans could react. A German infantry group attacking an American spot might face 50 to 150 caliber machine guns, all firing non-stop with endless boxes of ammo. German training said to save bullets. American training said to shoot a lot to keep the enemy down and stay in control. When those two ways met, the American side always won fights. In cities showed another side of how strong the 50 caliber was. When American troops fought through French towns and German cities, the 50 caliber was great for hitting enemies hiding in buildings and breaking strong walls. The big bullets could go through many walls made of brick or stone that stopped rifle fire. Tank leaders quickly learned to use the roof-mounted 50s to sweep upper windows
and rooftops before moving down streets. It was a simple but deadly trick. A tank would stop at a corner, and the leader would swing the gun across the buildings, firing steady bursts at any place that might hide an enemy. The non-stop fire made German soldiers duck so American foot soldiers could move forward. Then the tank would roll up to the next corner and do it again. German panzer teams who were deadly in open land and even more dangerous in cities where they could shoot tanks up close found that they could not fight well against American teamwork that mixed tank guns and 50 caliber cover. A Panzerfaustmann had to stick out to aim and shoot,
But American units kept 50 caliber guns firing all the time at any spot that looked risky. That made it almost impossible for him to get a shot off. German officers who fought in the Rhineland near the end of the war wrote later that defending cities against those American tactics was hopeless. German troops would take rooms high up with good lines of sight, but American tanks would just roll up and tear the buildings apart with 50 caliber fire and tank shells. The 50 caliber bullets could go through walls and even ceilings. There was nowhere safe. Soldiers tried hiding behind furniture or inside walls, but the bullets still reached them. The only way to stay alive was to leave before the Americans focused all their fire. But running meant losing ground, and soon there was no ground left to lose. Fighting in cities against an enemy with endless 50 caliber ammo crushed German morale. They knew in their minds that buildings could hide them, but not protect them. Yet their instincts still told them to take cover behind solid walls. Then they watched those same walls break apart as 50 caliber rounds blasted through thick stone and kept going through room after room. It shattered the feeling of safety. Soldiers felt unprotected even when hidden, scared even when behind what used to be strong cover. That fear built up over time. A man might live through one fight, maybe two, but each time he saw the 50 caliber smash what should have saved him, the stress grew until it broke. Whole units gave up spots without being attacked because they knew the Americans would soon blast them out anyway. The last fights inside Germany showed how totally American firepower dominated. The Germans fought bravely and sometimes won small fights, even when outnumbered. But those wins meant nothing when the Americans could bring huge firepower and flatten their positions. The 50 caliber machine gun was the base of that power. It was everywhere, ready to hit any target. It worked non-stop. It had more ammo than anyone could use, and American leaders told their men to keep firing until nothing moved, not to save bullets, but to destroy and control. German tank crews feared the 50 caliber for other reasons. Even though it could not punch through the thick front armor of their tanks, it could wreck their sights, break gear strapped to the outside, and stop their foot soldiers from helping them. The 50 caliber could punch through the thinner sides and backs of many German armored vehicles. In battle, American M10 tank destroyers had a 50 caliber M2 heavy barrel machine gun on the back of the turret to fight off aircraft and protect against nearby troops. Records show that M10s fired way more high explosive shells than armor-piercing ones, meaning they were often used to support infantry where the 50 caliber became key for what crews called cleanup fights at close range. A German Panzer team might knock out an American tank, but before they could get away, they would be cut down by 50 caliber fire from tank destroyers or support vehicles. Night battles made the 50 caliber even more terrifying. American ammo used one glowing tracer for every 4 regular bullets, so every 5th round showed its path. German soldiers could watch the glowing lines curving toward them in the dark, moving slow enough to see but hitting too fast to escape. It was a horror to see death coming right at you. They knew that for each tracer they saw, 4 more invisible bullets were following the same path. Ducking or dodging did nothing because by the time they saw the light, the bullets were already there. Old veterans learned to look away, but new soldiers couldn't stop staring at the bright streaks frozen by fear until the rounds tore through them. American troops used this fear on purpose. They fired streams of tracer-loaded 50 caliber rounds into any place they thought the enemy might be at night, lighting up whole areas with crossing lines of glowing fire. The sound and sight together were unbearable. German soldiers later said it felt like being trapped in hell. One squad leader, captured near Aachen in October 1944, said, "At night you can see them shooting, even when they can't see you. They shoot at sounds, at shadows, at nothing." Operation Cobra, the American breakout from Normandy, started with 3,300 tons of bombs dropped by 1,800 heavy bombers on German positions near St. Lo. General Major Fritz Behrlein, who led the Panzer Division, one of the best German units defending the area, later wrote for the United States Army Historical Division about what really destroyed his division. He said it wasn't just the bombing or artillery, though those were bad. It was the non-stop small arms fire that made it impossible for his men to move. American 50 caliber machine guns mounted on every kind of vehicle meant that his troops were hit the moment they tried to maneuver. He concluded that the Americans had solved the main problem of modern war. They could bring overwhelming firepower to the field without needing better training or tactics. Wehrlein, promoted to general lieutenant on July 20, 1944, fought again in the Battle of the Bulge and finally surrendered in April 1945. His post-war papers became key to understanding how Germans saw American combat. He wrote again and again that the 50 caliber machine gun, used by soldiers with only basic training and endless ammunition, created a level of firepower that German forces, with their skilled crews and advanced weapons, simply couldn't match. The winter of 1944 brought the Battle of the Bulge, Germany's final big attack in the West. The Germans surprised the Allies and won ground at first. It even looked like their tanks might reach the Meuse River and split the Allied armies. But soon, American supply power came through again, and with it, the 50 caliber machine gun. American troops rushing to the Ardennes carried their full load of ammo and gear, so even quick defensive setups could pour heavy 50 caliber fire on German assaults. The battle turned into the kind of long, brutal fight that favored American strength in weapons and supplies. At Bastogne, the surrounded American troops used their 50 calibers with deadly success, tearing apart German infantry attacks. The guns kept working even in freezing weather, through mud, snow, and non-stop fighting. The Germans made one huge mistake in planning the Battle of the Bulge. They thought bad weather would stop American planes and weaken American firepower. They were halfway right. The weather did slow air attacks, but the ground 50 caliber machine guns were just fine, and American supply lines could keep sending out more ammunition than the Germans could even imagine. General der Fallschirmtruppe Alfred Schlemm, who led the 1st Parachute Army from November 1944 to March 1945 before being wounded during Operation Veritable, had to defend against Allied attacks with fewer men and supplies. His reports after the war, like Wehrlein's, focused on the crushing mental impact of American firepower. Schlemm said by early 1945, German soldiers could recognize the sound of American 50 caliber guns from far away. They knew any movement could bring instant fire, and that they had no real way to fight back. This constant fear, he said, created a defensive mindset that made attacking impossible. His army did manage to pull back across the Rhine before the final Allied push, but he blamed most of his losses on the non-stop heavy machine gun fire during that retreat. The design of the Browning M2 helps explain why it was so deadly. It weighed about 84 pounds alone, or 128 pounds with its M3 tripod, which was heavy but still easy enough for a crew to handle. It could hit targets out to 1830 meters, far beyond the reach of German rifles or light machine guns. It fired 450 to 575 rounds per minute, slower than the German MG-42, but speed didn't matter when German gunners ran short on ammo. The 50 caliber rounds it fired gave it the power to destroy many kinds of targets. The standard M33 ball bullet shot out the barrel at 2,910 feet per second. Armor-piercing rounds could punch through 19 millimeters of armor at 500 meters. The M20 armor-piercing incendiary round could go through 16 millimeters at that range and would set fire to fuel or ammo once it hit. The M20 version had a tracer and could pierce 21 millimeters at 500 meters. This meant the 50 caliber couldn't punch through the thick front armor of German Tiger or Panther tanks, but it could pierce half-tracks, armored cars, and the thinner side or back armor on many German armored vehicles. Even more important, it could blow up engines, break field tanks, wreck artillery, and pin down soldiers far away where they couldn't shoot back. The M2 stayed reliable because of how it was built. John Browning started working on it in July 1917 during World War I. The first version, the M1921, was water-cooled and weighed 121 pounds, which made it too heavy to move easily. The air-cooled M2 came out in 1933, dropping the water jacket to make it lighter but still tough. The design was simple, strong, and worked perfectly. American companies like AC Sparkplug, Frigidaire, Guidelamp, and Colt made almost 2 million 50 caliber guns of all kinds during the war. About 350,000 of those were the heavy barrel M2 HB model, which could fire longer without overheating. This massive production meant US troops always had enough guns and spare parts. The Germans understood what they were up against.
Their weapons were often more advanced. The MG-34 and MG-42 were better as squad guns. The 13mm MG-131 aircraft gun fired faster at 900 rounds a minute, and their 20 and 30mm aircraft cannons did more damage per shot. But fancy designs didn't matter against sheer American numbers. The US had made one tough gun that could handle almost any job, and had built so many that it showed up everywhere. Every American bomber carried 13 M2s, and every P-47 Thunderbolt fighter carried 8. Every American combat vehicle carried at least one 50 caliber gun. Infantry companies had their own heavy machine gun teams. Anti-aircraft units could turn their M16 quad mounts against ground targets. The gun was everywhere, always ready, always had plenty of ammo, and always worked when needed. The effect on German soldiers built up over time and was crushing. A single soldier might survive being shot at by 50 caliber fire. A unit might even finish a mission despite the Americans having way more firepower. But after weeks and months of fighting, the constant fact that Americans could open up with massive fire at any moment, with guns that always worked, wore down German strength just as much as dead or lost soldiers. It wasn't cowardice. These were veteran troops who had fought across Europe and North Africa. Many had battled the Soviets on the Eastern Front. But the American way of fighting felt different. The Soviets used waves of men and huge artillery. The British used careful tactics and teamwork. The Americans just used endless weapons and supplies and kept shooting until the enemy gave up. German officers had a hard time getting men to attack when they knew heavy 50 caliber fire would blast them as soon as they moved. German infantry stopped wanting to fight in daylight. German vehicles hid in cover instead of advancing. The Americans took control not because they were better trained, but because their system, built on non-stop ammo and reliable weapons, made German tactics useless. The hatred Germans felt for the 50 caliber came from pride. They were skilled soldiers watching their craft crushed by mass production. The 50 caliber stood for everything about American warfare that Germans couldn't stand. The huge waste of ammo, the focus on machines instead of skill, the goal to destroy everything instead of capture. It was the way of an industrial nation that decided wasting material was cheaper and more effective than losing men or showing tactical finesse. After the war, German historians and former officers gave the same judgment again and again. The American 50 caliber machine gun was not the fanciest weapon of World War II. It was not the fastest, the most accurate, the lightest, or the most flexible. It was simply the most effective because it was reliable, everywhere, and always had plenty of ammunition. The gun itself was only part of the story. The real power came from the system that made millions of them, supplied billions of rounds, and used them according to a plan that didn't mind spending material to win. That system is what defeated Germany. The M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun's legacy is clear even today. 80 years after it was first made, it is still used by the United States and other countries. It has outlasted every weapon it faced in World War II and served in every American war since. Its long service shows how good the design is and how effective the American military way of thinking is. The bigger lesson became clear. German planners thought better training and smarter tactics could beat American numbers. That idea was terribly wrong. The 50 caliber proved that enough guns in overwhelming numbers with endless supply beat even the most advanced weapons in small numbers. German tank leaders who had outsmarted Soviet tanks could not fight American combined arms teams with multiple 50 calibers. German infantry who knew every trick of the MG-42, German soldiers found their skills useless when American troops could just pour non-stop 50 caliber fire onto any defensive position. German pilots who had mastered fighting the RAF
were shredded by bomber formations that cared more about constant fire than careful aim. The lesson was clear and harsh. In modern industrial war, the side that can spend more material wins, no matter how good the other side's tactics are. The Germans had a craftsman's approach to war. They optimized for efficiency, while Americans could afford to use overwhelming force. They tried to save ammo, while the Americans just spent it freely. What German soldiers painfully learned was that modern industrial warfare rewards the ability to keep using massive resources, not clever tactics or better training. The M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun became the symbol and tool of that lesson. German troops brought skill, doctrine, and determination. American forces brought an industrial system that could make and supply so many heavy machine guns that fighting back was almost impossible. When these two ways of fighting clashed, the outcome was never really in doubt.